Let's start things off by looking at union, which is the set operator that can be used to unify two tables together. If you've got two queries and you union them together, then if a row appears in the output of the first query or the output of the second query, then it will appear in the final output. Let's start things off with the basic query, which just obtains the first name and last name of each customer. We can run this, and we get 599 rows in the output. Now let's add a second query, which we use to obtain the first name and last name for each staff member from the staff table. If we run this, then we get 2 rows in the output. There's 2 staff members. Now let's add union, and let's unify these two queries. This now represents one query, which is all of the customers unioned with all of the staff members. If we run this, we get 601 rows. 599 of those rows came from the customer table, and 2 rows came from the staff table. If you recall though, all of the set operators by default will remove duplicate rows. In this case, there were no duplicate rows to remove, so we got 601 rows. If there had been duplicates, if there had been some customers or some staff with the same first name and last name, then we would have got less rows. Let's now union in the actor table as well, so that we've got a query which consists of all of the different people in our database, regardless of whether they're a customer, a staff member, or an actor. If we were to just run the actor query on its own, which we can do in dbeaver by just selecting that query and running it, we get 200 rows. There are 200 actors. There's 2 staff, and there's 599 customers. In total, that adds up to 801 different people. If we now run this query, instead we get 799 rows. What's happened there is 2 duplicate rows got removed from the output. So this suggests that there's an actor with the same name as a staff member or a customer. The final output we have now though consists of all the unique first names and last names from either the customer table, the staff table, or the actor table, all unified together into a single output. Union all though will keep any rows where there's duplicates. So if the first names and last names match, union all will instead keep those rows in the output. So let's replace union with union all. If we now run this query, we get 801 rows. So every person from the customer table, from the staff table, and from the actor table all appear in the output. With union all, the number of rows in the output is equal to the sum of the number of rows from the different queries that form the inputs. So union on its own will remove duplicate rows, and union all will keep duplicate rows. With all of these different set operators, the input queries must have the same number of columns, and each column must also have the same data type. When you think about it, it wouldn't really make sense to be unioning, for example, query results where there are a different number of columns, or the columns were different data types. So for example, if we just simplify this back to unioning between the customer and the staff table, if we tried to remove last name from this first query and run this, we would get an error, and the error says each union query must have the same number of columns. This query has 2 columns, and this query has 1 column, so they don't match. Likewise, the data types must be compatible. So if I tried to just introduce a literal value here, which is the number 33, and I tried to run this, again, I'll get an error. And that's because the second columns now don't match. One is a number and the other is text. So when you're using any of the set operators, not just union, the number of columns must be the same and the data types must be compatible. Let's restore this to last name. The names of the columns though don't have to be the same. Let's say we introduced some different aliases. So we called this fname and lname. And we introduced aliases for the second query as well. And we called this fname2 and lname2. We can run this and that will work just fine. What you will notice though, if you use different column names in the queries, is that the output column names come from the names that you establish in the first query. So the column names in our output are fname and lname, and they came from the first query. Generally speaking, to avoid any confusion, you're almost always better off always naming the columns the same. So you should call this fname as well and call that lname. Run it, that works just the same, and this avoids any ambiguity or confusion as to what the output column names will be. In terms of the formatting or the presentation of these sorts of queries, writing the query like this obviously is fine and that works. Another way that you'll often see queries that use set operators formatted though, is using parentheses around the queries themselves. So for example, I'll add parentheses around the first query. I'll add parentheses around the second query. And I'll indent the queries themselves as well. And I can run this, and I get exactly the same result. And in fact, this is my preferred way of writing any queries that involve set operators. So from here on, I'll be doing this. It just makes it clearer to read, in my opinion. And it also makes things clearer if you subsequently want to add some ordering to the final output. I've got here combined customers and staff. Let's say now that I want to order all those different people by first name. So I can add in order by first name. Running this, that seems to have worked. People are being ordered by their first name. And when you look at how this is now formatted, I think it's quite clear. You can see that the order by is being applied to the final output. By contrast, you can actually write this without the parentheses. So I'll go ahead now and remove those. And I'll remove the indentation as well. This works just the same, so I can run this now and get exactly the same output. But I think it's a little bit unclear when you read this. You could get confused and think that the order by perhaps only applies to the second query, rather than the entire unioned query. So I prefer the formatting that puts parentheses around the individual queries. Let's return to that now. So that's union. Next up, let's look at intersect.